Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome back to episode 85 of Inspiration Contagion. This week, I have with me Elayna Fernández. Elayna was born and raised in a slum in the Dominican Republic. She is a best-selling author, internationally acclaimed storyteller, and an award-winning mom entrepreneur. A 4-time TEDx speaker and a featured speaker on prestigious stages around the world, she weaves the tragedy, trauma, and turmoil she's endured into her storytelling, inspiring audiences to validate their own pain so that they can feel seen, safe, and supported, and to allow others to do the same. Elayna is best known for her contribution to helping aspiring mom entrepreneurs in turning their painful stories into profitable streams of income. As an immigrant to the US, she's passionate about diversity, inclusion, and representation, and works as an advisor to global brands and organizations towards equity and social justice. Elayna has been recognized as one of the top Latina influencers in the nation. She's also been selected by Success Magazine as one of the 125 most impactful leaders worldwide. With that, welcome, Elayna.
Thank you so much, Holly. I am so honored to be here with you. You are a force of nature and just enjoy having every conversation that we have together. So, thank you for having me.
Amazing. It's going to be a fun, fluid, and inspiring conversation. It's an honor to have you here. I want to kick off right away with what makes you an inspirational leader, or what would you say is your secret sauce?
What makes me inspirational and my secret sauce is my experiences that I've had over the years with adversity and gleaning lessons from those experiences to show up as a validating, caring, compassionate leader. I think that when we really tune into what it feels to feel pain, emotional pain, or to feel stress or distress, and we think about the other person with empathy and compassion, that makes us inspiring because people resonate with what you have to share with them, but also they are inspired to act, to move, to show up, to be greater, and to grow. And I think that's really the secret sauce that I learned the hard way through adversity, but I purposely and intentionally glean those lessons. I actually call myself a student of pain because I think when we sit with those experiences, we can really study and learn how to show up for ourselves next time and also how to show up for others.
Absolutely. And I'm sure as our listeners are tuning in that I've heard like there's a lot of pain and struggle and transformation going on in the world. There's a war out there. We're in the middle of some possible economic downturns. And so it's very inspiring, I believe, to hear that we can leverage and turn that pain into something that is of value, and I think that's an amazing secret sauce, especially today more than ever. So, with that, I also want to ask you, what does inspiration mean to you as a leader?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that already because I think that inspiration means the opportunity to help others move to action. I think that inspiration leads to implementation, and it's a feeling kind of, but it's not. It's more of a spark. It's more of a spark that moves you to take a step. And so I think that when you have the ability as a leader to help someone take another step, that's when you've inspired them. Not just helping them feel good and like has that sense of possibility that I can do this, but also I'm setting a date to do it, or I'm doing it right now, or I really feel empowered to do it. So it's I think it goes beyond that feeling that we usually associate with inspiration.
Absolutely. And I like to say to my clients and just when I'm speaking in general that we need to take action that matches the size of our dreams and our destiny. And so I love that definition of it not just being a feeling or a sense of something that's moving us, but that actual spark that lights the rocket fuel, so to speak, underneath us so that we can make that transformation and take that next action, whatever that is for each of us.
Yeah, I love that
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for helping me build it. It came from you too. So it's always fun when we co create with people and get inspired by their words so that we can create new metaphors, new stories, and new ideas. So, on that, obviously, based on your introduction, you've learned quite a bit in the space of peak performance and you've learned a lot from these lessons of pain. Wanted to ask you, how do you define peak performance and how did you arrive at that definition for yourself?
Yeah, so I really love that you asked that question, and especially, in this context. And I think that for me, peak performance is giving it all you've got. And sometimes that fluctuates. And so I think that I come from a space where all you've got is a zero, from a 0 to 10 scale is a 5. And sometimes all you've got from a 0 to 10 is a 10. And sometimes it's a 0 where you have to step back and do nothing and reflect and re energize yourself and restore so that you can show up at a 10 next time. So it's that ability to give it all of your strength, all of your energy, and no matter what that is, you could be a high performance coach or a high performance leader, employee, parent, teacher, mentor. So in every area of your life, you're showing up at the highest capacity, but to give yourself grace, understanding, having the self awareness of what that capacity looks like. And I'm going to add, Holly, also communicating that. So if we think about our workplaces and our homes and everywhere where we show up, to letting other knows I'm at a 5 today, or I'm at a 10 today, and having that sense of communication and collaboration with others to be in partnership when we have to kind of fluctuate who does what and to what extent. Because I think that that's how there's a high performing team, when there's that level of communication where everyone says, this is what my high performance is going to look like today.
Oh, I love that for so many different reasons. So I kind of want to unpack that to make sure this really sinks in for folks who are tuning into this episode. First of all, your peak performance is giving it your all, but your all varies every day, every moment, every second. So, first of all, being aware of where you are on that scale of 0 to 10. And also the reminder that I hate to break it to you, this is something I struggle with myself. We are not superheroes. We do not have endless sources of energy. We are human. And I have to remind myself of this pretty frequently that I am human and that I require receiving, re energizing, stepping back. And with that, oftentimes a lot of my clients, they'll be in a season where they keep throwing spaghetti at the wall. They keep trying and pushing and forcing. And oftentimes, when they're doing that and not getting the results that they want, it's because they really need to let go and step back, like you were saying, re energize, re examine. What I also love was that communication piece, having that grace, but also communicating clearly around exactly what you need and where you're at. And when you communicate that with your team and with your family, you're building intimacy and connection and community, and you're allowing them to step up in a new way where they can step into their superpower and really lift you up as a team versus just relying on yourself, which is really, really important. So, the next question I wanted to ask you was, obviously, this isn't perfect. What are some of the challenges or obstacles that you faced along your journey to peak performance?
Wow, I think that I really appreciate how you unpack that. Fabulous.
Well, thank you.
In a fabulous way. And I think that for me was actually knowing that I needed to take care of myself. It was really knowing that my mind, my ideas, my creativity, my source of creation and energy, it is directly related to my body and to my ability to enjoy life. So I think that it's kind of a given, and we kind of know that. And somehow there is a disconnect sometimes, and where we think like, "Oh, I can work on this project all night, and I can do that again and again and again and again," and to lead ourselves to the point of burnout. So burnout was a very common mode for me. It's like work, 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 perform, 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 burnout. And rest, but not really rest, just recover. And I think that was kind of the main wisdom nugget that I gleaned from that process was there's a difference between resting, which is intentional, which is proactive, which is really caring for yourself. That's what self care is about. And then there's recover because you have just made yourself sick, made yourself exhausted, and made yourself really, I would say the word broken, even though that's not literal, right? Like we have neuroplasticity and our body self heals, but in the sense of something has to be put together again. And sometimes it can be put together exactly the same way. And so that was my go-to, and I understood that it was a coping mechanism. So for anybody who's listening, it's not like we love to make ourselves exhausted and sick. Is that there's a, I would say, operating system telling us that maybe our value is our ability to perform. Maybe there's a survival, uh, I would say, pattern that we have because we had to perform to survive before. So I think the best way that I was able to overcome that obstacle was to get deep, to sit with my pain, which is a practice that I always recommend, and to understand where those beliefs came from and what those beliefs were about performance. And now I can rest and perform. I can recover because sometimes we do have to kind of drive ourselves a little harder, and that's okay if we set up a time to recover. Like I'm hosting an event next week, and I know that the event is on Saturday, so Sunday and Monday, everything is blocked for my recovery. So that's something that I really recommend is to know that in this journey, there will be times where you will hear a voice trying to push you, and you got to question that voice.
Yeah, yeah, so true. And the way I look at this is when I look back at corporate America, school, society, there's this very type A driven metric out there of performing, achieve, be the best. It's all competition driven.
Mhm.
And they don't really show you the real cycle. Like, so there's this state of performance where we're in flow. And when we're in flow, magic happens. Miracles come together, serendipity, and you're just like, wow, I'm just crushing this. But you can't stay in flow forever. And when you continue to push that and you don't recognize that it's time to rest, which is pre need to recover because you're not burning out. But when you get out of flow, it's kind of a signal, hey, it's time to rest. It's time to take a break. It's time to just do nothing, to be with yourself, go deep within yourself and see what the next discovery is so that you can release something else. And the more you let go of these things, the more you get into a supernatural state of flow where even bigger things happen and things come together that you can't even fathom right now. But one of the hardest lessons that I have also learned, similar to what you're sharing, is get off the hamster wheel.
Mm.
The hamster wheel was not created by yourself. It's not who you're meant to be. It's not how we're meant to live. And while, yes, we're in the United States, both of us, and we are in a capitalistic society, but that doesn't mean we have to live the same values. We can make money, we can have a profit, but we can also decide what's enough and how we want to live our lives. And I met this guy recently who describes himself as a hippie capitalist. And I was like, I'm going to borrow that. So I'm proclaiming to everyone listening here, I am a hippie by nature, inside and out. It took me years to figure this out. And that's why I don't fit the corporate mold. But I'm a hippie capitalist because I'm not afraid to earn money. I don't have a bad relationship with money. I like the energy and flow of money because when I go big, I can give big and give back more. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yes, get off the hamster wheel. Give yourself permission to rest. It's
Yeah.
okay to rest.
Yeah.
Don't force yourself to the point of recovery. And like Elayna was recommending, when you have big things that are out of your comfort zone, schedule time for recovery because you're stretching yourself.
Yeah.
Love it.
I want to add, that when I first thought about this lesson, it came as an aha moment for me. I thought about the time I had a very just tragic car accident when I was 19 years old. And I remember just being in a coma for 8 days and I could do nothing. I couldn't even breathe on my own. And thinking about a time where I was in bed, couldn't do anything, and I was thinking, what is my value? Like, I can't do anything. Everybody's doing everything for me. And I thought back about this coma and thinking I was able to listen to everything everyone was saying. What if they said that about me? What if they said, oh, she's not good? Like, she can't even breathe on her own. She's not valuable. And that just really brought it home for me. Like, I am valuable when I do nothing. I am valuable when I get help. I am valuable even in those moments where I feel clueless about the next step. And so, not associating our value with our level of performance is huge. And knowing that we have to kind of, and I use this analogy because I've been in a coma. Maybe, you haven't, but when I was able to get back in my body, that's when I felt alive. And so, in those moments of rest and recovery, to make sure to get in our body, we have this precious breath that we can take if we are not in ICU and life support, right? And so now I remind myself to breathe, to be in my body, to remember what it was like to be laying there and not able to move, and to remind myself of the recovery process, even after I was not in the hospital anymore with a brain injury and 19 broken bones. And so it's like, instead of being forced to lay down and rest, it's like we are taking proactive change in knowing that we're valuable no matter what we do or what we don't do or what others do for us.
Yeah, we could talk for days on this because I am a firm believer that when we don't rest by choice, life will give us forced rest.
Yeah.
And I've had a traumatic brain injury myself where I had to take 9 months off of not working. I've had a spinal fusion that's kind of forced me to, for a period of time, rely on others. And these experiences teach us, if we're willing to get the lesson, that rest is necessary, but it also teaches us the valuable insight of receiving support from others and realizing it's okay to get that support, and it's honestly essential. And then also, of course, not tying your worth and who you are to dollars and performance and the standard typical things we associate with that. I like to, and I've mentioned this in previous interviews, I think about that movie It's a Wonderful Life, the impact you're having by your smile, the small things you do, the words you're sharing, the stories you share, your energy. Even if you can't move, you have a machine breathing for you, your energy, your soul, who the essence of who you are is adding value. And so really, as you're listening to this, really think about that and take some time to rest and get clear on how that feels for you. But we could talk for days on this. We're going to move on to the next question. All right, I want to ask you, how do you create a culture of peak performance in your company?
Yes, I love this question so much because I think that that culture starts with safety. And that's my favorite topic to talk about is emotional safety. When we look at, let's say, the at Maslow and the pyramid of needs and the I think the model for human behavior and motivation, we think that the lowest or bottom need is going to be safety. It's going to be psychological needs, but then it's going to be safety needs. And when we think of safety, people sometimes think about having a roof over their head, or maybe having a coat when it's cold, or having food. And that definitely, is safety. And yet, and safety and psychological and physiological needs. And yet, safety is also emotional. Safety is also an environment where you can be self expressed, when you can be autonomous. And I think autonomy is key to peak performance in any area. The ability to feel like an owner, to take ownership of what you're doing, and yet, if you don't feel safe to express your ideas, to express your beliefs, to express who you are and the essence of your being, then you're going to limit yourself. Your capacity to create is gonna be limited. Your capacity for innovation, your capacity to connect with others, because without that safety, there is no vulnerability, there is no creation, there is no innovation, there's no risk. And so I think that creating that safety is how you can create that high performance in your company. That's how everybody can show up as themselves and as their best. And together, having that safety to communicate and collaborate, we can make, like you said, miracles happen, magic happens, because everyone is in their zone of genius. Everyone feels like they can collaborate, but also that they do collaborate because everything is appreciated. I love when you said that this model of performance based on competition doesn't work. I always say to my daughters and to my clients and to my team, when we only compete to lose. We only compete to lose. Someone loses when there's a competition, but when there's a collaboration, we collaborate to win. There's always a win. Whether it's material and tangible, or it's soft and intangible, it's a winning that happens. And I think that creating that culture of safety, and that starts with validation for people and who they are and what their struggles are. I think that having a trauma responsive leadership style is going to be very key for that, because we're humans, like you said, not superhumans. So it's not like we can turn off our triggers and our insecurities and our issues when we go to the workplace or we log on and start tracking our time remotely. It's really understanding the integration of all aspects of life and how all of that is brought to work and all of that is valid. Not only my history, my background, my perspectives, my circumstances, what's happening right now, and even my aspirations of the future. So bringing that whole, I would say, whole being and seeing that whole being, but also requiring others to do the same. So, it's great to be a leader and to be show up like that as a leader, and then yet allowing a different thing, because culture is not something that I can create. Something is something that I can encourage and cultivate. I can create the environment where that culture is going to flourish, but the culture is created by the people. And so the people need to be encouraged, educated, and kept accountable to that environment to really continue in that culture that you encourage or invited to others to participate.
Amazing. So much wisdom in that response. I'm going to unpack this one again before we move on to our next question. So, a few things that I want to highlight for our listeners in that are, first of all, I believe we kind of live in a world that is very much emotionally not safe. And so, imagine if you're able to create a workspace and a work environment or a community, whatever it is that you're building as you listen to this, where you have that emotional safety. You provide that neutral space where you're not trying to just fix it and solve it and force your beliefs, your opinions on that person, but allow them to just show up as themselves and be vulnerable and their whole selves. That is where innovation occurs. That is where culture is co-created. And I like how you said that you're not creating the culture. You're building and creating the container that allows you with your team, with your community to co create what that looks like based on a solid understanding of how we show up with our traumas, our triggers, our backgrounds, and as our whole selves so that we can show up in a safe container for that. Super, super important, not easy to do, but my goodness, if you could create that for your company, there's a lot of employers out there. A lot of my clients have been saying that it's been difficult to attract and retain employees. I don't know about you, but if you're offering that kind of work environment with that kind of autonomy, with that kind of growth opportunity, and that ability to innovate, grow, be vulnerable, and build that community, that's pretty remarkable. And it's going to be very difficult for somebody who's aligned to that to say no to. So if you're listening, you're creating that, please take some of those cliff notes, those highlights, and start building what that looks like for you. Don't copy what we're saying, but take it and make it your own. So on that, I wanted to ask you, pivot a little bit. We talked about culture. We were talking about how that works for employees. How have you optimized your customer experience if we're looking at peak performance and your customers?
Yeah, I love that question, because I think that when you make that environment of safety available for your team, it just spills over. It just, it's the natural progression. It's that old saying that hurt people. And when we think of hurt, we are thinking about usually a high level of toxicity, but it just shows up in the little details. When someone is excited about doing what they're doing, they're going to pass on that excitement to the person who's receiving the service, who's buying the product, who's at the other end. And so one thing that I think is crucial for us to understand as leaders is that the environment that we create, it's really like, I tell my daughters, because they're Gen Z, and I said, it's a fax, because they didn't grow up in the fax era. But it's you're sending that entire message and that entire environment to your customers. And so that's where it starts. And of course, it has to be intentional. So you want to have everyone have a say in the customer experience, and to understand that I can, as a leader, say, well, this is what I think based on my assumptions, and that's all they are. And I think that as a leader, if we realize that we are conversation starters, that we are not decision makers, I think it's key, because who is the expert of the customer experience is the person that's working directly with the customer. And so it's really easy for us to assume something and make a decision and then see what happens. And I like your analogy of the spaghetti in the wall. However, if we really listen to those people that are, and again, that they're safe to speak about what's happening with the customer, what really is the pain point that they're expressing, what are their goals, what are their aspirations, what is it like, what are they saying, what even is their language, so that we can use it in our marketing. Then we are able to really create a customer experience that matters, because we create a culture not only of safety but also of caring. And now I care about you as my team member, but you care about the customer, and it becomes a cycle of caring all around, where I know I am a facilitator of the conversation, a conversation starter, but that the true wisdom, the true knowledge, the true expertise about what the customer wants, needs, and requires is going to come from that person who has direct contact.
Beautiful. Yeah, I like the facts analogy to up level that for our listeners that aren't familiar with faxes or want something new. I would say uh, if you create that amazing employee experience where they feel safe to be emotionally seen, heard, and show up, they will then replicate that. And what that allows you to do in your business is to create a magnet to attract the right people, but a magnet also equally to compel those who are not a fit to not sign up, to not work with you. So you're creating a magnet for the community, the tribe, the environment you want to create with your customers as well as with your employees when you do this correctly, which is extremely powerful. So we're gonna pivot a little bit. We're gonna dive into the show me the money part of the show. I want to ask you some questions about revenue. When have you left money on the table, and what did you do to fix it?
Love that question. And I think I immediately go to being a speaker. And I remember, I actually kind of was thrown into the speaker bus. And what that means is one of my mentors just called me to the stage to share my story. And I was completely terrified. I was walking to the stage, just butterflies in my stomach, and thinking, does he really want me to do this? And feeling also self-conscious about my accent and about how I looked, because I was the behind the scenes person. And and so I started my journey of speaking kind of unintentionally. But then as I started speaking intentionally, I didn't have a product or an offer to sell after my speech. And I understood the difference between, and it's what actually we were talking about, how people felt inspired, but they didn't know what to do next. They didn't have a next step. And so if any of our listeners, they haven't really aligned or outlined, actually outlined their customer journey and understand the problem solution journey, then that's, I think, where I left money on the table for a while. And then I know that's where most speakers and entrepreneurs sometimes leave money on the table, is not realizing that every time you solve a problem, you create a problem, and that looking ahead and being proactive to doing that is going to allow you to be more creative and come up with better solutions and creative solutions that are fun to come up with. But also you're serving your audience a lot deeper because they're going to really go on an actual journey with you to really become better, and get better depending on whether you have a product or a service. But I think it's having that intentionality to understand what is the progression of my customer and how can I help them all throughout, and fulfill every single need they have.
I love this. We could talk all day about this, but I'm just going to share a couple things. A lot of the clients I work with are speakers or aspiring speakers. And one of the big misnomers that they have is they value the stage ticket price or the speaking opportunity price at what they're being paid for the event. That is ludicrous. That's crazy. I want you to
Yeah,
throw that idea out the window
yeah,
because the value of that stage is if your ideal potential customers are in that room or people that are going to hire you for the next speaking, if they're in that room, you want to monetize that room by having an offering. Even if you're not allowed to sell from that stage, you darn well better have something free that's compelling that you're still selling because you're still selling even when you're just asking for their email address for that free thing. So that then you can, after the event, bring them into your world, get them on a call, sell them a product. You are losing and leaving so much money on the table if you have not done this. And then, secondarily, Elayna mentioned the customer journey. One of the things that I help my clients with is outlining their product pyramid. And this is service or product related. Mostly I work with service based businesses, but when you stay attuned to what your customers need, you will never lose a customer ever again. You heard me. You don't need to continue doing lead generation because eventually you'll have such a great customer base. You'll have natural referrals come in. You'll be upselling your customer to that next thing, and they'll love you forever because you're constantly solving the next problem because you're that attuned to what they need. So if you do those two things, boy, money will not be an issue. It will just come in waves and it will be supportive for your clients. And that creates those win-wins we've been talking about. All right, my next question on revenue. What is the next shiny object that you want to turn into a new revenue stream?
oh, I love that. Because I actually was thinking about ways to incorporate more fun and creativity into my life. And I thought about how I would love to, and it's just a passion of mine to bring back my childhood dream of being a voice actor.
I love it.
Yeah. And then I was thinking about how does this really match with what I've been doing? Because, there's always a way. If I can offer something about this, is that there's always a ways that in which things gel together. And like I help moms create offers and books, and it's like I could narrate books. You could be an actor and narrate ebooks, and you could be an actor and narrate programs. So there are so many ways to really match everything we do and make it work together. And so I was thinking about that. This is a very, very brand new idea, so I can articulate it perfectly. And that's what I love about it, how raw it is, how it's so exciting. I'm still figuring it out. And yet it's definitely an income stream that sounds exciting for me, and that it could be uh, actually the opportunity for passive income, which is where I love to live because of the royalties that come from it. So I'm all over that.
I love it. Yeah. And another idea alongside that passion of the voice acting bit is once you become an expert in that space, you can also offer coaching and consulting with your clients or training on that, because you can imagine a lot of the moms you work with, they want passive income, they have exciting things they want to do, they have books that they want to either narrate in their own voice or have somebody that they trust so that they can interview properly based on the proper skill sets. They don't know that until you teach them that. So there's so much you could do with that. Those are just two ideas. One that you came out with, one that I shared. I'm sure if we put our brains together longer, we'd come up with 5 more ideas of how you could monetize that passion.
Yeah.
And that's inspiring, is when we go after those childhood dreams, those things that have lit us up since the beginning of time. It's fun. And that's what you want, so that you can do this thing day to day and stay inspired and not burnt out and continuing the path.
Oh,
Amazing.
thank you. And yes, I love it. Absolutely. I am all with you on that.
Can't wait. You'll have to come check back in with our listeners in the future and tell us how that's going and where we can get your books that you're narrating.
Yeah.
Um, all right, with that, this has been an amazing interview. We're actually going to go into our wrap up questions. I want to ask you, what is the best one piece of advice that you would share with others today?
I think, and this is a hard question, as you know, but I think for me, it all goes back to that validation. I remember that when I went through a very traumatic event, and I was only 19, and I was really, really in a very dark moment of my life. And I remember people coming up to me and saying, "You've got this, you can do this, and it's going to be great. And you have your whole life ahead of you. And you should be grateful that you survived." And this was a horrific event in which I was kidnapped and brutally assaulted and almost murdered. And in that moment, I felt what I like to call motivational shame. And so I think that in our workspaces, in our homes, in the places where we show up, to be aware that motivation is not the answer sometimes. That sometimes you just sit in pain with that person and you let them know that you're there. And whether they're your team member, employee, whether they're your sister or your child, they are going to feel the motivation is going to come from them. They're going to feel like, I'm not alone, so I've got this. So you don't have to say anything. Be comfortable with silence, be comfortable with being present. And that's hard to do because we want to fix, we want to help, we want to motivate. But every time I see an article, how to motivate your team, how to motivate your teenager, how to motivate someone, it doesn't start there. It starts, how do you create safety for that person so that they can confide in you, ask for help, receive your help, and that's going to motivate them to be who they were meant to be.
Beautiful. Learn to hold space and sit in silence. I agree with that wholeheartedly. My last question for you: what is the legacy you wish to leave behind?
I love that. My legacy, I want to be someone who can see people with and that can hold space, like you said, and support people. I want to always be known as someone who was a safe space, a supportive friend, and someone who could really be there for someone. And so, if that's what I do with my presence in this planet, then I believe that my legacy is completed, in that I can build it now, but also I can pass it on and teach it to others.
Beautiful. That is a powerful legacy. On that note, we're going to end our interview. But if you want to get in touch with Elayna I have her website information. I have her Amazon author page. I have all of the links where you can find her on social media. If you want to hire her as a speaker, work with her, learn more about her, I highly encourage you to reach out to her. Those will be in the show notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, they'll be in the links below as well. Please reach out to Elayna, and to our listeners, I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Inspiration Contagion. Thank you. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.